empowering people with their smartphones. The problems of the world are complex. We're faced with climate change, with financial, economic, and spending crisis, with conflict and war, with mass migration, with terrorism, and all of that has a common root, which is lack of sustainability. So basically, we are overusing resources, quite dramatically, in fact, and that implies shortages of resources in some places, and that causes conflict and war and mass migration and all these kind of things. And these problems come ever closer to us. So we need to fix this, because otherwise we'll run into economic and population collapses predicted by the Club of Rome's Limit to Growth study, and there have been many other studies trying to predict the future fate of humanity, and they more or less say the same thing. We are in trouble. And in fact, people say the planet is terribly overpopulated, and that is related actually with the growth of a carbon-based economy. That means the use of oil and gas basically to have machines work for us. Unfortunately, however, that has a terrible impact on our climate. 1/6 of all species might die, and so we now have to reduce carbon emissions. And anyway, some people think there's a peak oil problem. We are anyway running out of gas and oil. That's controversial, but in any case, we need to reduce CO2. And that means oil and gas production and coal. And this means that will have an impact on the carrying capacity of this planet. Right? If the number of people grows roughly proportional to CO2 emissions, in a sense, reducing CO2 emissions, if we can't replace those energy by renewable energy within a short time period, we'll run into this capacity problem. And basically that means 1% of reduction of carrying capacity implies 80 million people will die, and 1% is a little reduction, right? It could be a much bigger reduction. So if you go back to these curves over here, then you would see by the end of this century there would be a few billion people less on this planet, and we would very soon run into these economic collapse problems. So really, we need to come up with a solution quickly. We are in trouble, right? And that's why there are books like this, which basically say we need to learn to die. And in fact, the Pentagon is already preparing for mass civil breakdown, and the rich are preparing too. They're building their luxury bunkers. And so this implies ethical problems, and some people have thought, well, maybe we don't need to send people to war. Maybe we can build AI systems which would basically decide who would have the right to live on and who would die. And that means euthanasia, based on a citizen score, and that comes down to a digital judgment day. And here we go. I was one of this series of the Terminator movies, right? And then if you look up what is kind of the expected date of the judgment day, do it. I mean, there are web pages about it. And you see, maybe this story is to tell us something about our possible future. And if you want to get a better idea actually of what are the implications of introducing a citizen score as it's currently being done in China already, then read this science fiction novel I Got, because it's really talking about all those problems which are in the air and that we shouldn't ignore. really. Now the question is, will super intelligent systems save us? As some people have suggested. So basically, we have an exponential increase or even faster increase of intelligence of computer-based systems, and it's expected that within 20 years' time we would have computers as smart as human brains. And then after this singularity, there would be super intelligent systems, and given that the military is probably 30 or 50 years ahead, most likely there are already these kind of super intelligent systems around. And so the hope was that once we have these systems, they would eventually understand the problems that we humans are too stupid to understand, and they would fix it one by one. And they would control the world and make sure everything is fine. And I told you yesterday about these world simulator war games that are being done, and unfortunately the one who came up with all those visionary ideas, Brzezinski, who died very recently by the way, he concluded at the end of his life that this chessboard was broken. And because, well, it's not a chess game. The rules are changing. We're changing the rules, right? And actually, it's a much more complex game. Complexity is really an issue, and complexity requires a multi-perspective approach. But in any case, I'm not saying we shouldn't use artificial intelligence. There will be useful tools. As they get smarter, they will be like teammates. In fact, they're already being used in some boards of companies. And then they might be our coaches and tell us how we can improve. And the question is, when will they want to be our bosses? MIT is already doing research about this. Already many years ago, computers were better chess players. In many areas, they are better workers. Robots don't complain. They don't have to pay taxes, they don't get tired. They're more precise in many cases, so no good news for people maybe. They might be better drivers soon, better doctors, better in answering those questions that have already an answer. They're becoming more and more capable, and they might actually start building other robots, right? And why not better robots, evolved robots? So there will be basically a robot evolution. There will be new intelligent species besides us. And they would compete for the resources of this planet.
So I'm very excited about the opportunities. I'm also concerned about the problems. The problem here is that every area in blue on this map is somewhere where services are over 80% of employment. What are services? These are services. These are also the exact things that computers have just learned how to do. So, 80% of the world's employment in the developed world is stuff that computers have just learned how to do. What does that mean? Well, it'll be fine. It'll be replaced by other jobs. For example, there'll be more jobs for data scientists. Well, not really. It doesn't take data scientists very long to build these things. For example, these 4 algorithms were all built by the same guy. So if you think, oh, it's all happened before, we've seen the results in the past of when new things come along and they get replaced by new jobs, what are these new jobs going to be? It's very hard for us to estimate this because human performance grows at this gradual rate. But we now have a system, deep learning, that we know actually grows in capability exponentially. And we're here. So currently we see the things around us and we say, oh, computers are still pretty dumb, right? But in 5 years' time, computers will be off this chart. So we need to be starting to think about this capability right now. We have seen this once before, of course. In the Industrial Revolution, we saw a step change in capability thanks to engines. The thing is, though, that after a while, things flattened out. There was social disruption, but once engines were used to generate power in all the situations, things really settled down. The machine learning revolution is going to be very different to the Industrial Revolution, because the machine learning revolution, it never settles down. The better computers get at intellectual activities, the more they can build better computers to be better at intellectual capabilities. I know that when I often tell people about this situation, people can be quite dismissive. Well, computers can't really think, they don't emote, they don't understand poetry, we don't really understand how they work. So what? Computers right now can do the things that humans spend most of their time being paid to do. So now's the time to start thinking about how we're going to adjust our social structures and our economic structures to be aware of this new reality.
So that's maybe the most important point. We now need to adjust our social and economic structures. Have you seen it happen? I haven't. So there will be serious implications of AI on our economic systems. You know, we may work for food, they may work for free. So a lot of jobs will be gone. And in fact, we already see that in many European countries like Spain, Greece, Italy, there's a huge youth unemployment, sometimes above 50%. And certainly we are experiencing another economic revolution. After the Industrial Revolution and transition to the service society, we are now seeing the digital revolution. It will change everything. Business models, economic sectors, public institutions, our economy, our society, our financial system, everything will change. Now, if you look into a history book, then, yes? That's the digital economic sector. Now, if we look into a history book, then we'll notice that eventually things will be fine, but in between, in the transition phase, when things get unstable, basically you will see financial and economic crisis, and you will see revolutions and wars. Now, obviously, the financial and economic crisis has already been there. We haven't managed to really fix it. The revolutions and wars are not needed. We should really try to avoid them. And so the question is, how can we do that? It's a tricky thing, because remember the times when horse carriages were replaced by cars. What do you think happened to those horses? And in these times, basically, people are sent to war because there's no need for them anymore. Now, if you don't want this to happen, then you need to make sure that economic reform will happen before war breaks out. I'm not the only one who thinks like this. You know, Jack Ma, the boss of Alibaba, I think the biggest IT company in China, and I think that also means it's bigger than actually Google or Facebook, most likely. So he says, if we don't reform our society, then we might end up in a third world war. Now, in fact, if you look into social and economic inequality, then it turns out it's as bad as before the French Revolution, right? So the question really is, what needs to happen? What I can tell you, that we cannot solve our problems with the same kind of thinking that created them. We need to change thinking, we need to change the organization of our society. There is a need for a fundamental transformation. Playing the old game, the monopoly game, where everyone tries to get as much resources as possible of this planet, will certainly not ensure that there's enough for everyone. So we need to change the game. We need to change the rules. Don't hope it will happen by itself. So, you will have to make a contribution to this. And yes, we need a new approach. We need more innovation capacity, more ideas, more science, and citizen science can be, I believe, one component of the solution. In fact, Obama at that time has started a national initiative, as far as I remember. Now, why is this? Because similar to that situation, that an array of antennas is more powerful than one huge antenna. The same thing applies basically to people. Right? There's people power. There's certain kind of problems that can be solved best by a crowd of people. And so there are also very nice applications. So for example, it's possible to map cities in 3D based on all the photographs that you shoot and upload to all sorts of repositories. And Obama has also at that time started an initiative in favor of making that. Means another participatory approach. Here is a way to scale it up to address global problems. City Olympics. We could have every 2 or every 4 years a competition between cities for the best solutions to energy efficiency, to climate change reduction, to resilience, to sustainability issues, to resource issues, to environmental issues, whatever. There would be different disciplines, as it's typical for Olympics. There would also be different weight classes, like small cities would compete with small cities, large cities would compete with large cities, and we know that competition actually naturally raises everyone's effort, and it's fun, right? It's much better than telling people you shouldn't consume so much, you shouldn't use your car, you shouldn't go on holiday by plane, and so on. It's much better to come up with innovative solutions together. And so basically scientists and engineers would be involved, the media would report, politics would be involved, the citizens would be mobilized to come up with new solutions and to implement them, apply them, buy new technology, to make sure that we are making quick progress. And then every other year there would be a cooperative phase where cities can copy the best solutions that are fitting their city and their culture. The solutions would be open source, Creative Commons, that have been paid by taxpayers' money basically, so should be there for everyone, could be reused, further developed, and so on. So it would be an alternation between competition and cooperation, as it should be, right? And I'm sure that would fix the world much more quickly than this very strange idea of a world government that would force everyone to do certain kind of things. Everyone would have to do the same thing. What is needed really is a set of diverse solutions, experimentation, innovation, and that's the way to do it. Now we are faced with complex systems, right? Our financial, our economic, our social systems are complex systems, and here is a very interesting observation that even though processing power is increasing exponentially, it's doubling every 18 months, and data volume is increasing a bit faster, it's now doubling every 12 months, it will be every 12 hours sometime in the future, thanks to the Internet of Things. We are running into a situation where we have the best technology ever and more data than ever in the history of humanity, but we fail to control the world. And why is this? It's first of all because there is this gap opening between data and processing power. That means you need to know what data to process and how. You cannot necessarily automate this, in particular when the rules change, when the system changes its nature. The other thing is, as we network the world, that creates a combinatorial increase in complexity. That's the red curve, and that even overtakes data volume. That means top-down control will work less and less in many areas. We need a new control paradigm, which is distributed control. Fortunately, there's a new technology, blockchain technology, and it allows to come up with decentralized autonomous organizations. So in principle, if used well, it could empower people. If it's used in the wrong way, you would have to first pay for, say, every word that you're using before you can even talk, right? So, I mean, some people want to attach a price to every word and idea and picture that's out there in the world. If you do this, of course, then the world cannot freely evolve, you know. I think it's really important that we have a maximum innovation capacity now, and that requires freedom. Now, complex systems today is often characterized by networking, and these network systems don't show, in many cases, the intended behavior, but you would see side effects, feedback effects, cascading effects, and as a result, society cannot be steered like a car. So things like this would happen. Phantom traffic jam. No. People there are well educated, they have a driver's license, they have it's seemingly all the data that they need to drive smoothly, and they certainly want to avoid this traffic jam, but still it happens. It happens because of systemic instability, and systemic instability is actually the reason for most of the unsolved problems that we have. So you can see these kind of cascading effects can mess up an entire system, as it has actually happened in the financial system with bankruptcy cascades that have hit hundreds of banks and caused hundreds of billions of losses. So now let's look into a new way of controlling the world. So this is the way we do it today. There are a lot of rules, there's over-regulation, but there is another way, which is this: designing infrastructure platforms that basically help people to do the right thing. That's a funny example. I'm not sure. No, that movie has disappeared, unfortunately. So actually, the idea is at least 300 years old. Societies have been compared with beehives and ant colonies and all this. And the question is, couldn't society work like this in some organized way? If planes would want to do this, I would never enter a plane. You know? It's astonishing that birds can do that, right? With their very small brain. Okay, but in the future, I think with the Internet of Things, we'll be able to do that too. So I'm confident that 300 years after Adam Smith came up with this concept of the invisible hand, we can finally make it work. So how to create the kind of self-organization complex system that you like. Let's have a look at this. Oh, hopefully that works. No. Oh, codec unavailable. This is, so basically, what we've done in our research is that we have simulated traffic flow, we have reproduced the stop and go waves as we see them in real traffic flow, and then we have basically implemented measurement sensors such as radar sensors. We did that not only in a computer simulation but also in real cars, by the way. Even before people were talking about Google self-driving cars. So these radar sensors were measuring distances and relative velocities, and then they were used to have the cars accelerate and decelerate in an automated way, but slightly different from humans. Namely, in such a way that the traffic flow would be stabilized without centralized control, just based on decentralized interactions. And the capacity would be even slightly increased. So we can dissolve quite a few traffic jams in this way, even if not every car is equipped with that kind of technology. Now, how does it work? Well, the trick is called mechanism design. You need to change the interactions to change the outcome of self-organization, which was before stop-and-go traffic and afterwards smooth, free traffic flow. In order to change the interactions, we need to do real-time measurements and introduce real-time feedbacks. And that enables the kind of self-organization that I'd like to have. In principle, that could also be applied to society-scale problems with several levels and incentives which would basically change the interactions in a favorable way. But this approach actually leaves freedoms for flexibility, adaptation, self-organization, innovation. So that is much more favorable than the top-down control that I was talking about yesterday. And in fact, it also works very well in urban areas where we've come up with a new self-organized traffic light control scheme where traffic flows control the traffic lights locally, and where neighboring traffic lights are coordinated with each other, and that coordination is spreading all over the city by self-organization. And that actually reduces waiting times for all participants of intermodal traffic. It's also better for the environment. So the interesting point here is that a decentralized approach outsmarts a centralized control approach, as it's typical for traffic control centers. And the reason is that traffic control is an NP-hard optimization problem and cannot be solved in real time strictly. So you need to make simplifications. And the simplification that you usually do is that you say, oh, let's operate intersections in a periodic way and synchronize the cycles. It sounds very plausible, but you throw away a lot of solutions, including all the aperiodic solutions that turn out to be actually among the best solutions that you can have. So decentralized approaches are also getting more popular in power grids, those smart grids in Industry 4.0, in production, where now the products could be equipped with sensors, which allows the products to talk to the machines that produce those products, and the products would talk to each other, and that could allow for entirely new ways of coordination, organization, and in fact a similar approach can be applied actually to societal question. Elinor Ostrom, the Nobel Prize winner, has shown in empirical studies of self-governance that this can be efficient given proper design principles. So again, it's a matter of mechanism and institution design. So, how would it look like? Let's talk about disaster response as an example. And so, this is today's survival kit. That is tomorrow's survival kit. And basically, we're talking about digital assistants. Smartphones could help us in all sorts of situations. And this is how I imagine that digital technology should be used. So, in this case, you decide to turn it on or off. You select the goals. Then some proposals are being made. You can choose. And once you've chosen, you get the best possible solution. You're guided. And this is how digital technology should work. It shouldn't deceive you. It shouldn't control you. That's what I think. You want to take a picture?
Yes.
Now, we can, for example, use the accelerometers, I mean sensors in our smartphone, to collectively determine earthquakes. Our smartphones could warn our friends. They all start shaking at the same time. Then certainly it's time to get out in a safe place. It could give your friends a few extra seconds, actually. Then once disaster has struck, then you can use your smartphone to map crisis. I've run a hackathon in San Francisco a few years back. It was called When the Big One Strikes. So they're expecting a huge earthquake sooner or later to happen. It should have happened already, they believe. So it's probably about to happen pretty soon. So what can you do in this kind of situation? First of all, you can use your smartphones to take pictures of broken bridges, damaged buildings, and all this. You can annotate this, you can upload this. So that information would be available to the government, first aid teams, military, but first of all also to your neighbors. You would know what the situation is like in the neighborhood. So that kind of information would be uploaded when there's connectivity. But sooner or later, your smartphone would run out of battery, and in disaster situations, often electricity is out. So there's a blackout usually, right? So you need to have autonomous solutions to charge your smartphone. That's the smart beacon solution that was proposed. So there are solar panels. Neighbors could charge their phones over there, talk to each other, figure out what the problems are and what would be possible solutions. And then it needs a coordination tool, something like a sharing economy, and that's helping hands. So you can say what kind of help you need, and you can offer help, and that can be matched locally, right? All in the decentralized way. Now, of course, not only electricity will usually break down, but also communication. So how do you fix this? Well, with ad hoc networks. Our smartphones could actually talk to each other directly. It wouldn't have the same bandwidth, but still we could keep up some communication capacity in this way. We should also have a payment system, of course. Also, that should work in a decentralized way. It could be done with blockchain technology. So all of that should be in our smartphone for the case of disaster. So disaster strikes, a little AI should wake up in our smartphone and say, don't panic, I'm here to help you. And this is a tool to help yourself and to help each other. right? Now it usually takes 72 hours for the government to regain control. But it's the first 3 days where most people die. So in the beginning you will have to help yourself and each other, you know. It's participatory disaster response is what will save your life. And of course, digital assistants can also be used for all sorts of other situations, to support situational awareness, to increase success in interactions, to warn you of dangers, to incentivize favorable interaction. In the diverse world, we certainly need to create interoperability. Smartphones can be our guides. They can help to overcome cultural barriers. They can do real-time translation. They can speak languages that you don't speak. So you can basically talk to people from 20 different countries in your own language because your smartphone will translate it in real time. So the point is that we'd like to use smartphones to boost self-immunization. So I showed that already. Somehow, sorry. So here's where we continue. We're ourselves working on a platform called Nervous Now, which is open source, and I'd like to invite you to contribute to its creation. So the idea of NervousNet is basically to create an Internet of Things platform which is there for everyone. Your smartphone has about 15 sensors in it. Most people don't know about it really, and you usually can't use these sensors for the kind of things that you'd like to use it for, but that can be changed. We can open these sensors, we can connect smartphones to build a global measurement system. And the point that we would be concerned about is, of course, that we should be able to trust this kind of system, so it doesn't spy on us. And so we should be able to control which of the sensors are activated and whether this kind of data will be used just for yourself or will be shared. And that system should be run as a citizen web. It should be a participatory system. Would work a little bit like Wikipedia, but for open data. And the principle would be to give and take in a fair way. That means you can take data, source code, modify source code, upload it, other people can take it, improve it, and so on, right? So that's the idea. So source code is on GitHub. And this should create new opportunities for all. Produce data for everyone, enable data analytics by more people, enable Internet of Things based applications and services. And yes, this is about empowering people, not telling them what to do, but helping them to be more creative and more innovative, helping them to take better informed decisions, helping them to coordinate each other and to cooperate. So then automatically this will lead to better services, better products, more successful businesses, nicer neighborhoods, smarter cities, and a better future. And through its open innovation approach, that will enable combinatorial innovation. You can build on what others have done. You can stand on the shoulders of others, you know. And that will create an information, innovation, production, and service ecosystem. Yeah, and this is happening. You know, there's some students who get very excited about this, working on it, but we'd like to extend it and have international hubs of people who contribute to this. What can you do? You can detect objects, for example. We've been hiding these beacons. People have been trying to search them. Yeah, my students have also been at the Chaos Computer Congress and checked out, how very privacy sensitive people feel about all this, but they have been happy to participate. So what we've done is we have measured proximity of people, not geolocations, right? Because that is already too revealing. So we restricted ourselves to the minimum information needed to create a picture of social networks without knowing who is who and where they were standing. So this is really about thinking about the minimum amount of information needed to answer your question, in this case, social network structure. Now, you can also build a smartphone-based radar sensor. And in fact, we built a game called Treasure Hunt. It's available on the App Store. And there you can hunt for those Bluetooth beacons or other smartphones, and it's quite fun. So, what else can NervousNet in principle do, or would be able to do in the future? So, real-time measurements, greater awareness, scientific insights, digital assistance, real-time feedbacks, optimization systems, and collective intelligence. So, we'd like to have compasses for decision makers that would allow us to understand things that you can't see, such as social capital, like reputation, trust, solidarity, and these kind of things. We could map resources and who uses them. And in fact, we've created an app which is called Swarm Pals, where you can drop geolocated data, for example, measurements of light or noise, or text. Text could be a link to a photograph, or to a movie, or sound recording. So in principle, the idea is that this could be used as a platform to map a city, or a forest, or an ecosystem, whatever. We've worked on another app called Grippenet, Influenza Now, where people can report if they don't feel well, anonymously, of course. So we don't know who they are, but everyone would get a better picture where the flu is troubling people, and whether it makes sense for you to immunize yourself to get the flu shot, or maybe it's not needed. So it's better information, health feedback by the people for the people in an anonymous way. And another application is this asset app for conscious consumption. I think it's not fully finished yet, but the idea is the following, that you wouldn't be nudged by a company to buy certain products, but you would tell your smartphone what kind of products you would like to have. You could say, actually, price isn't everything that matters for me. I would give it a weight of 40%, but I care about environmental friendly production, give it a weight of 30%. I care about socially responsible production, I give it a weight of 30%. And I have the following allergies. And then you would use your smartphones to scan products codes. You don't want to read all the small print of those products, of course. Your smartphone would evaluate it basically and tell you, given your preferences, this is the product that fits you best, that's the second best product, and so on. So you would find the products that you like, companies would not learn about your consumption behavior, but would get aggregated information. So they would learn, oh, actually people are willing to pay a little bit more for environmentally friendly products. You know, this is the kind of products that people really like to have, and so they would start producing products better fit to our own preferences. So turning things around, you know, you become the one who says what you want, and not the company tells you what you should want. Right? We had this already. Now, the biggest problem is to make our world sustainable. I told you it's a matter of life and death. And don't think this is just happening in Africa. No. There are a lot of signs that I'm confronted with that our governments are preparing for times where there will be not enough food for us in our countries. So it's really about time to wake up and do something, you know, get sustainable. Now, the point is, every one of us creates 50 tons of waste in a lifetime. 50 tons. Now, these are tables, boards, TV sets, computers, smartphones, cars, stuff that would be enough for 5 people. We just throw it away. You know, most of that stuff. Some of it is recycled, but most of it is not recycled. So our current economy largely works the following way, that companies use fresh resources, produce as much copies of a product as possible to produce those products cheaply, economies of scale. Then they use a massive amount of money for marketing campaigns. For example, Apple used $1 billion to push the iPhone on the market. This is to make sure that people would buy all those products that have been produced, to convince you that you want something that you didn't want before. Then you consume the thing, then you throw it away, and that's where it ends. Linear supply chains. You know, this is what kills this planet. Now, the solution obviously is the circular economy. Reuse of resources, sharing of resources. Absolutely logical. If you would do that, then there would be enough resources for everyone. It's just bad organization that now creates this life or death situation. And this is what we need to create. So how to create this sharing economy and the circular economy? Well, we need to measure externalities. I mean, the effect of our behavior on the environment and on other people. Noise, CO2, all sorts of waste that we produce, pain, stress, unemployment, all sorts of stuff that we'd like to reduce. And positive things too, like cooperation, health, education, new jobs, reuse of wasted resources. And then we'd like to increase positive externalities, reduce negative ones. And you do that by an incentive system. In fact, a multi-dimensional incentive system that could incentivize each of these resources separately. CO2, aluminium, steel, you know, different kinds of plastic, and so on and so on and so on. And in fact, such a system can now be created with blockchain technology. And the idea is basically to attach a digital label to all the resources and the products that we have today. So I would say, I'm a piece of wood, that much, this kind of wood, I'm a piece of glass, I'm a piece of plastic. What kind of plastic, you know? He would say, come on, grab me, use me, reuse me, you know? So he would create new market forces. Because we couldn't create a circular economy effectively through regulation. We've tried, it was very slow, not very successful. So market forces would be the right thing. It requires a new financial system, a multidimensional financial system that is coupled to externalities. Can be built now. Not for a long time, but now it can be built. Now, just in the right moment of time, it could save our lives. Yeah, we should boost co-creation, mentioned that already. And I think what we also need is to boost innovation altogether. Currently we have a situation where inequality harms economic growth, and it's partly because of the way that we do innovation today, which is you come up with an idea and then you will be told, oh, get some money and do it. Okay, so you start talking to people and say, hey, I have a great idea, can you give me some money for it? And it turns out you will usually spend weeks and months and years, you know, and then eventually most people just give up on this. There are few people who are lucky enough to talk to a venture capitalist, but there are few of them and they have little time, right? And then they will listen to you, kind of this elevator pitch, you know, kind of 1.5 minutes or so, and say this or that. And then maybe you got 30 millions, but you won't get it if your idea will disrupt the business models of that venture capitalist, you know, like the kind of business that he's making his billions on. He wouldn't want to have ideas that reduce his earnings on these other ideas that he is supported, right? So he makes sure that your great ideas that would save the world, that would disrupt all business models, would not have a chance to go forward. In fact, a lot of companies, by a lot of small and medium-sized companies and spin-off companies, just to make sure that their business will not disrupt the business of the big companies that buy those small businesses. And this is why the world is not being saved. There are enough ideas, but most of them are killed. You know, it's in a sense, it's a memocide, you could say, not genocide. It's a memocide in a sense, right? So ideas are killed, and that needs to be changed. So basically, here is the point that today we have a very rigged financial system where hundreds of billions are pumped into the system in a top-down way. It's called quantitative easing, you know, to stabilize the markets. It's claimed to be in our interest. You never get to see this money. Small and medium-sized companies never get to see this money. If they have an idea, they're asking for a credit. Most of them have difficulties to find money, get it from the bank, you know. So this money is just for the rich. They want to keep up their outdated business models. So instead what should happen is this money should be pumped into the system in a bottom-up way. It should be transferred to your bank accounts. Not for yourself, but to give it to other people with great ideas who do projects for our environment, for our society, people who engage, who care about new technologies, saving the forest, the ecosystem, whatever, you know, helping to build new kindergartens, parks, repair streets, and all these kind of things. You decide who gets how much of that investment premium. This would be the way to fix it. Now, the wisdom of crowds. Activate it. And that requires diversity. We need a much more pluralistic innovation to save the world and to save our own lives. And we need to learn to boost collective intelligence, to come up with better solutions. That means to combine the knowledge and ideas of many minds. And this is what digital democracy would be about, the upgrade of democracy with digital means. The interesting point is that when a complex problem needs to be solved, and you would make a competition, and it turns out that the best solution might not be good enough, as it happened in this Netflix challenge. Look it up at Wikipedia. But what happened is that one day they combined the best solution with the second best and the third best. You would think, that would reduce the performance of the best solution. It would deteriorate the performance. But just the opposite happened. Suddenly, they jumped over the success hurdle and they won the competition. Then the fourth, fifth, and sixth solution, or something like this, was combined. And it turned out it was as good as the other one. So it's diversity that wins, not the best. You need to integrate different perspectives. So I believe if we do this, we can all live in an age of prosperity and peace. To fix the world by 2030, we need to change our financial, monetary, and economic system. If we want to survive, this is what we need to do. So it's not a world government that will save us. It's these kind of things: digital democracy, digital assistance, a new socio-ecological finance system, open innovation, democratic capitalism, city Olympics, and let's do this together. Thank you.
Other questions? I hope there are comments. Yes.
I have a question for what you said yesterday. You ended with a sort of call to action for, let's say, social engagement. And I was connecting what you said with what we heard in the previous presentation, that there is a kind of epigenetic making us evolving. So my question is, are smartphones empowering us really, or they are stealing our attention and our anthropological capacity of interaction with other people? So have you reflected on this kind of evolution of our brains and our capacity to work together and to be really concentrated on a social goal, or are we rather more self-distracted by our smartphone? And just a second question. In Italy, we have a new political movement saying things quite related to what you say, that we should have a kind of direct democracy thanks to the network. So I was wondering if you have studied that phenomenon and what you think about that.
Okay, so these are two very interesting questions. Number one, I think the way we're currently using our smartphones, it's made to steal our attention. It's made to make us addicted to the use of the smartphone and the platforms that we're using over there. And that needs to change. currently we're turned into tools, right? The AI systems that are basically running the internet and the web applications today, this is just a virtual thing. The way to have an impact on our world is using us as a tool, as if we were a printer or a machine that does something on behalf of that AI that tells us something to do. We should do it the other way around. We should use our smartphone as a tool, right? But that requires to design those platforms in a different ways. And that requires that we are not just consuming these services, but we are becoming co-creators of what is happening in this cyber-physical world that is now our reality. And that requires actually opportunities for creativity. Most apps tell you this is what you can do, either you accept it or you won't get the service. There is not much space for creativity. And that needs to change, I believe. The second thing about this populist movement, like 5-star, I think it's not yet what we need to have. It's a populist approach in the sense that there would be a new kind of majority that again decides what everyone has to do. And I think we need to evolve from a democracy where, say, 51% tell the 100% what they have to do, towards a democracy that creates freedom for co-creation for everyone. I mean, it's very important for this collective intelligence to happen that there are enough minorities with additional perspectives to add something to the majority view. You know, if you want to improve upon today's democracies, then it can only be done by taking more different points of view on board. And that requires better coordination tools and a new kind of platforms, basically. And obviously, Facebook isn't that kind of tool. Yeah, it might evolve into this direction one day, but currently it isn't.
Thank you again.